me on this episode, season 2, episode 2 of the show about the show. I am your gracious host, as always, Devlin Clark, and today I am very happy and honored to be with former Major League outfielder Brian McRae. He played for several different teams. He also played for his dad, Hal McRae. We'll get into that and a bunch of other stuff. But for now, let's turn it over to Brian. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Enjoyed the weekend of watching some basketball and the NCAA tournament, which is always fun. And for me, it means it's a little bit closer to opening day as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. You got a team in the tournament that you're rooting for?
I went to the University of Kansas and also the University of Missouri, and both of those teams are not in the tournament anymore. But I root for both of those squads.
Sure. You talked about spring training being in full gear. We have also got the World Baseball Classic. I'm sure, as a former player, you're following that. But let's talk a little bit about spring training. What did this time of year mean for you in terms of, late February, early March, and kind of getting ramped up for the season as a player? What kind of, mindset were you in? And can you talk about that?
The last 10 days of the regular season was when I really wanted to wrap up everything and try to get whatever offensively from right-handed to left-handed, whatever I was working on, try to get those fine-tuned. I wanted to play more games and more innings this part of spring training and make sure that my legs were, being a center fielder and with speed being a real big part of my game, I wanted to make sure that my legs were ready for the grind of the season. I didn't really like the 3 innings, 4 innings, 2 at-bats thing. That didn't do me a whole lot of good in spring training because, one, I play a premium position that I need my legs, and you really can't get game-type situation in any other thing that you do as an outfielder, especially center fielder, unless you're playing a lot of innings during spring training. And as a switch hitter, I needed to get as many at-bats as I could from both sides, too. So I was always in a constant fight with my managers in spring training. I want to play 9 innings. I want to play a full game. I want to get ready for the regular season. I didn't have hobbies when playing golf during spring training where some of the veteran guys would play 2 or 3 games in a row and then take a couple of days off, play some golf. Like, that wasn't me. I couldn't do that. I wanted to play games. So this is when I really wanted to, if they wanted to give me a day off, I said, let me play 3 days in a row, 9 innings, give me a day off to work on some things, and then let me play some more like that because I'm playing every day and I need to be on my legs and I need to be ready. And so that's what this part of spring training meant to me, was getting as many at-bats as I could get in and getting as many innings in the field as I could get in, because you could play 3 or 4 games in the outfield and not get any fly balls hit to you.
Right.
I wanted to get as much game type rep and not practice rep as I could.
So you didn't want to be stretched out. You just wanted to go in there and just play 9 and get, make it like regular season ready.
This time of the spring, early in the spring, I understand what they're trying to do. Right. They're trying to get some younger kids, you're easing your way into it. And I was okay with that. Right. But the last 10, this Monday, and the regular season is on the 30th, 10 days. I wanted to play almost every day to get ready for the regular season.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Get that ramp up going. You made your major league debut on August 7th, 1990 with the Royals. But before that, you mentioned that you went to Kansas University and you almost ended up playing basketball at Kansas. They offered you a football. I'm sorry. You ended up almost playing football. They offered you a scholarship, actually. Can you talk about what made your decision to play baseball a little easier when the Royals drafted you 17th overall?
It's just a safer sport.
Yeah.
I wanted to I picked a safer sport. I figured that I had a chance to I had a better chance of being a Major League Baseball player than I did being a National Football League player.
And you weren't actually supposed to go in the first round. You were actually predicted to be like a lower round pick. Were you surprised when the Royals took you 17th overall? And what was that call like? Obviously your dad, Hal McRae, had been a major leaguer at that point, so you kind of knew what the process of Major League Baseball was like. But can you talk about that moment for you and your family?
Well, the draft wasn't like it was today, where you get all this attention to,
Right.
the day of. I was out. I think I was at baseball practice or something. I wasn't even home when they got the
Oh,
call.
really? Okay.
And they call a landline phone. No
Sure.
cell phones in
Yeah.
1985, and they still send a telegram.
Okay.
So that was I didn't find out till hours later that
Okay.
I was drafted. And I think the Angels and the Yankees watched me play more high school baseball down in Florida than the Royals did. So I thought I would be drafted somewhere, from the 5th through the 10th round is what was hearing. And I thought that the Angels or the Yankees would have been the team, because they were the teams that watched me most playing high school ball.
And so you get drafted in 85, and I don't think it's any secret, you kind of struggled in the minors a little bit for your first 4 years in terms of hitting. But the one thing that you'd kind of mentioned earlier is you wanted to have your legs under you. You stole 88 bases in your first 3 years. Did you kind of know at that point that speed was going to be a huge part of your game, both offensively and defensively as a center fielder?
I thought that was something that would help me if I did struggle, because I was an infielder when I was drafted.
Right.
I didn't move to the outfield till 89. But if you can run, they'll find a place for you. And that was an aspect of the game that it was in high demand in the 80s and from the 80s to the mid 90s or so. Speed guys were in high demand. And if you struggled offensively, you could have some leeway because you could do some things on the bases and defensively that could help a team win that way. So I wanted to make sure that, that part of my game needed to be as solid as possible.
And you talked about obviously speed back then, and there's one name that, when you talk about 80s and speed, you talk about Ricky Henderson. Did you ever get a chance to interact with Ricky much, and did he give you
We
any
were
advice?
teammates in '99 with the Mets for a little bit.
Okay.
So I got to be around him.
Okay. Did he give you any tips on like how to stretch your legs out, any base stealing tips, anything, how to read the pitcher?
Yeah, a little bit of everything, and just picking his brain and watching him and how he went about. By the time I was his teammate, he was well into almost his 20th something year in the league, and just watch how he went about his business on a daily basis, how he got ready to play, and how he read pitchers and the things that he did. It was nice to be around somebody that had done as many, great things in the game as he had, and he was still very productive until late into his career. So that was
right.
That was great to be a part of that, and to say that you played with some Hall of Famers is a pretty cool thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. You talked about spring training earlier, and this time of year, you as a center fielder, especially, and somebody who relied on speed, you really wanted to kind of stretch yourself out, have 3 or 4 at bats, play 9 innings, etc. This time of year, the Twins have a guy kind of similar to that, Byron Buxton. He's probably the best defensive center fielder in baseball, or at least one of them, and he uses his speed and his legs a lot to track down balls. He's had issues staying healthy. Can you kind of talk about, especially being a defensive center fielder who prides themselves or whose maybe specialty is speed, how important spring training is to being able to get those extra reps in to make sure that you're doing what you need to do to play the 162 game grind?
Well, I think for a guy like him, it's the off season and how he prepares his body to get ready for spring training and then the season. So he may have to tweak some things that he's doing in the off season, because that's where you make all your gains, in the off season. Once you get to spring training, you're doing a different schedule than what you would be doing during the off season. You're in better shape in the off season as far as your body wise, not baseball shape.
Right.
But you're in better shape in the off season when you come to spring training than you are when you leave spring training. You're in baseball shape, or you should be, when you leave spring training, but your body wise, you get that molded for the rigors of the regular season in the off season. So what I did in the off season, I made sure that I was in the best shape possible going into spring training, knowing, my position is demanding. I worked on my lower body and legs more. I wanted to make sure I kept those strong. I was fortunate enough that I really didn't have a lot of injuries in my career. I never went on the DL, anything like that. So I learned what my body could do and couldn't do, took care of it as best as I could, and just to make sure I was prepared coming into spring training, that my legs were in as good a shape as they could be in.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that it's more than just the physical aspect. It's more than just lifting weights. There's also strength training and conditioning and nutrition and getting proper rest and things like that. Can you talk about maybe some of the non-physical stuff that you did to keep your body in shape in the off season?
Well, I tried to simulate as many things as can happen during the season in the off season, so your body's used to it. You talked about nutrition and getting proper rest. There's sometimes when you're not able to do that.
Right.
There's sometimes where you have a flight delay, you're getting into 4 o'clock in the morning and you're playing a game the next day. So you have to get your body ready for that. So how do you work on no sleep? How do you prepare yourself when you can't eat right? Those are things that I did in the off season to make sure, I worked out after I had little sleep or didn't have proper nutrition, but I still went and worked out and tried to, do the things that I needed to do daily. And that's what you're going to have to do during the season. You can't get 8 to 10 hours of sleep every night, and you're not going to be able to eat right every night. You're going to play day games after night games where you're getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep. How does your body respond to that? And your body can only respond to that if you practice doing those things. So every now and then you have to throw your body a curveball and say, I'm going to get up at 6 in the morning after, going to bed at midnight or whatever. And on 5 or 6 hours of sleep, I'm going to try to get a workout in and see where my energy level is, because during the season, I'm going to have to do that at some point.
Let's talk about spring training 1987. You and your dad were the first father-son combo to ever appear in a major league game in spring training 1987 with the Royals. What
85.
do you remember about 85?
Or,
I'm sorry. What do
no,
you
I got
remember?
drafted 85, 86.
86.
The next spring training after they won the World Series.
What do you remember about that?
I remember going to big league camp because most first rounders, the following year, you get invited to big league camp because you're a first round pick. The Royals had won the World Series in 85.
Yep.
So I was going to camp with the guys, majority of the guys had won the 85 World Series. And I had a chance I was bat boy, ball boy, did all that when I was younger, down in Fort Myers. And now I get to be on the other side. Not only the team that I've been around pretty much my whole life, with my dad playing there after his short 4 or 5 years with the Reds. And then, my dad's still playing. They're coming off a World Series, and I get to participate in some spring training games early. So that was a big thrill and fun to be a part of that. And even though I didn't get to the big leagues until 1990, that was still a big step for me, is going through big league spring training, my second year of pro ball, just to see it from the other side.
Were you just kind of a sponge then? Were you just kind of soaking in all
as a
the
kid also.
Yeah.
Because as I said before, I was a ball boy, a bat boy in spring training for 8 or 9 years. So every weekend I would go down to spring training from Bradenton, Florida. I go down to Fort Myers and be bat boy, ball boy. Then my spring break, I was bat boy and ball boy for spring break. So I would get maybe 20 spring training games in each year where I was a bat boy, ball boy, and I would hang out with them when they were working out before the spring training game started. So I was taking that all in at a young age, because I didn't play a lot of organized baseball. I was at the ballpark with my dad. I would hit in the cage with the guys. Since I was too young and too little to be in the infield, I was in the outfield all the time. So I learned how to shag fly balls and how to track fly balls by being in the outfield. And so I just took all those things in, being able to, spend time with my dad at the ballpark, but also I was learning the work ethic of Major League Baseball players and what they did, the good things they did, the bad things. I took the good and the bad, and and I got to, I probably didn't know it at that time that how I was being a sponge and soaking it all in, but it paid off because once I got there, I'd been around it so much that it didn't faze me to see what was going on, what I needed to focus on, and how the exceptional players did it.
You mentioned the Royals won the World Series in '85. We talked briefly earlier about Ricky. You'd mentioned that he was one of the few Hall of Famers you played with. There's another pretty good Hall of Famer at third base on that Royals team, George Brett. Do you have a George Brett story you can share?
Well, off the field, his nephew and I are about the same age. And
Okay.
when his nephew would come in during the summers, he stayed with my family. And we'd hang out at George's every now and then, and we'd drive him home sometimes when we weren't even able to drive. We'd drive him home from restaurants or establishments after a game, and we stayed with George.
Sure.
We were probably 12 or 13 years old, and
Okay.
drive one of George's Porsches back to his house, and he let us do it. And thank God, I don't think we wrecked it too bad. But yeah, that's George used to take care of us, or we took care of George, and it was fun, being around and just, you didn't realize that you're in the presence of a Hall of Famer at that time. But since he was single and young, he used to take care of us. So we spend weekends with George and hang out and all that. And I just remember his work ethic, though. That he might have stayed out till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, but he was one of the first guys at the ballpark getting work in the next day.
When you play with guys who made the Hall of Fame like that, and you're a young player, even, maybe after you've debuted, is it easy to tell based on work ethic and kind of mindset, this guy's going to be something special? Maybe not Hall of Fame level, but superstar level, just because of the extra time they put in, the extra work, whether it be in the batting cages, in the film room, that kind of thing. Were you able to tell that, like, hey, some of these players are going to be very good, or maybe even in the Hall of Fame?
You could just tell that there was guys that are at a different level. You're all big league players, but there's some guys that just do some things that the other guys can't do.
Right.
And so I watched that with Kirby Puckett when we go in and play the Twins my first few years. There was just something different about Kirby that other guys couldn't do. You watch him take batting practice, and he'd take 30 swings, and he may miss hit 1 or 2 balls. And he did that. He was very consistent. There was just something about him, the way he went about his business and how he worked, that, you could just tell. It's an outliner. Even though you can tell when somebody's that much better, because they're able to do things day in and day out that the other guys can't do.
I had umpire Dale Scott on my show about 3 weeks ago, and he said the guy that was like that for him was Ken Griffey Jr. Just putting in all that extra time and work. Did you kind of see that from Griffey too? He was a young player right about the time you came up to. He debuted in '89, and he also had a dad who was obviously a major league player as well. So he had kind of that onus on him as well. Could you kind of see early on with Griffey too that, man, this kid's something special?
Well, unfortunately for him, he made things look so easy that people didn't think he worked hard.
Right.
And I think kind of Carlos Beltran is kind of in that mold. There were guys that they worked extremely hard. They put in a lot of work that you didn't see, but because they played the game so effortlessly, they made it look nonchalant to other people. But that's because they'd already got themselves prepared for that.
Absolutely.
And they were, with the work they'd done behind the scenes, they were able to make the game slow down and look easy.
You debuted on August 7th, 1990, and the reason that you debuted is kind of unfortunate. You guys had a pretty good player named Bo Jackson who got hurt. The Royals had tried Jim Eisenreich and one other player in center field, and they finally settled on you. First of all, what was it like playing with Bo Jackson and seeing just that freak of nature just up close? And then secondly, what was it like to get into that game? Talk to me through your major league debut.
Well, I was in Huntsville, Alabama in Double-A, at the time of my call up, we were playing the Huntsville A's. And I got a knock on the door like 3, 4 a.m. from our manager telling me to get my stuff and go to the ballpark and get my equipment because I got called up to the big league. So I thought he was joking around,
Right.
and didn't really take it too seriously until he kept banging on the door. It's like, get your stuff, go. And again, those are the days where there's no cell phones. So I know that I'm going to the big leagues. They have a flight for me from Huntsville to Atlanta, Atlanta to Kansas City. I can't tell anybody. There's no paper. Like, I'm rushing to get things. I don't get a hold of anybody until I get to the Atlanta airport. And I call my mom because my dad was with the Expos, I think, at that time in Montreal, coaching there. So I called my mom to let her know that I got called up. Fly into Kansas City. I get there probably 3 to 4 hours before the game, not thinking that I'm even in the lineup, because I just got called up, and I see my name in the lineup that day. And, that they kind of just threw me in the first day, and it was all pretty much a blur that first few days in the big leagues because everything happened so fast.
Yeah, and you went in because Bo Jackson got hurt. You played a little bit with Bo. What was Bo like? Like, I've heard interviews where people have said, they asked guys in the clubhouse if you could have any athlete's body, who would it be? And everybody would say Bo Jackson. Can you kind of either share a Bo story about how a freak of nature he is, or just how strong he is that people may not know? I think a lot of people remember the him breaking the bat over his knee after a strikeout. Can you give me a Bo story?
Well, I think that most people don't realize that Bo was probably, if he would have stuck with, he would probably, as good as a football player as he was, he probably would have been a better baseball player if he would have stuck with baseball and been a one sport guy. We didn't see the type of ability and performance in baseball, even though he made an all-star game, was the MVP. It's like we still didn't see everything that he could put out there on the baseball field, and that's a shame. We saw it in football. We saw how good he could be.
Absolutely.
In football, but there was another level that he was close to getting to in baseball. He was starting to figure some things out, and that was scary.
Do you think if he had stayed healthy and played baseball, would he have been an MVP?
I don't know if he would have been an MVP, but he would have been able to put up MVP type numbers.
Yep.
And
he would have been conversation.
Right. He would have been one of the most dominating players. He might have done some things like what Aaron Judge is doing now, things like that. He would have been that type of player because, as I said, he was just starting to figure it out. He won an MVP of an all-star game when he didn't even know much about baseball. He was still learning. That was 89, I think, when he won the MVP. He was still figuring things out. By 91, 92, it was all starting to click a little bit. And it would have been interesting to see the progression from there if he wouldn't have been hurt.
Absolutely. One kind of side question that doesn't really deal with playing Major League Baseball, but just kind of from my point of view, I've always been a baseball card collector, or I guess a memorabilia collector. Can you tell me what it's like as a baseball player when you make the major leagues and you see that first either fan with your card asking for your autograph, or just what it's like to see your face on a baseball card and be like, man, I've got, no matter what happens, I'm on a baseball card.
Yeah, your first card is what you're waiting for all winter. From in my case, because I got called up late in the season, so there wasn't a card for me during that season, but the following winter. So when those first cards came out and I got to see them, and the card companies send you a copy of things early. There were a lot of card companies back in the 90s, so that was kind of cool to see. excuse me, all the different variations of cards, and then go into spring training in '91 and seeing kids and autograph seekers with your baseball cards. You know, that was a neat feeling, and you felt like you finally, you know, you grew up thinking like, one day, what's my baseball card going to look like?
Right. What's the kind of going off of that? I'm sure, as a baseball player during your career, you've obviously done some broadcasting for the Cubs and Baseball Tonight afterwards. And obviously you're still, you're always going to be a former major league player. I'm sure you still get fan mail. What's kind of one of the what's maybe the weirdest or oddest or most unusual things the fans ask you to autograph?
Nothing weird or odd. One of the more unusual things was that the Royals do like a caravan.
Yep.
Where they go to their radio affiliates, or used to.
Yeah.
I don't know if they still do it. In the off season, they'll go to the cities that carry them and go to have a luncheon, speak at a high school or the local college or something like that. Have a Q&A sessions and do things like that in the different cities that have Royals affiliates on radio, out in western Kansas and southern Missouri and some rural areas. And a guy came up to me and said that his sister was buried with my baseball that I signed for her at a game. You know, so that was something. You never know what the story is going to be for the people that you sign cards and baseballs for. And it may be the only game that they come to, and you try to get to everybody. And some days you can't, some days you're just not feeling it. Some days time constraints that you can't do everything that fans want you to do. But, that made me think that, on those days where I don't feel good, or after 10 minutes of signing, I want to go take a shower and see my family, maybe stay an extra 5 minutes, because you don't know who you're going to impact if you have time to do those things. So that was something I tried to make sure that, I spent a good amount of time to do as much as you can't do everything. You can't sign everybody's autograph.
Right.
But to try to do as much as I could each day, but not take away from what I needed to do on the field. Because a lot of times you're doing it before game and you need to get yourself ready.
Right.
Or take away from my family, which I'm away from them a lot during the year, and spend more time away from them. So there's a fine line there.
1990 was the year, obviously, that you made your debut. 91 was your first full season. The Royals named your dad Hal the manager for the 1991 season. Emily actually has a question. She wants to know, what was it like playing for your dad as a major leaguer? Was there extra pressure? Was he extra hard on you? And also, did you feel extra pressure yourself to perform above and beyond being, just being a regular major league player, but having your dad as your manager?
The biggest thing at that point in my career was just trying to establish myself as a everyday major league player. He came up, it was probably May or June of that year. John Wathen was the manager before, so he didn't start the year with the team. It was my first full year in the big leagues. So he was trying to figure out himself as a manager. I was still trying to figure out myself as a player. So it wasn't so much of the father-son aspect. I was trying to keep a job and stay in the big leagues. Right. And he was trying to get the team back on track, and learn the nuances, what you have to learn for being a first-time manager. So it wasn't until 93 where I think I really felt comfortable, 93 and 94, where I really felt comfortable more so in me being established big leaguer now after having a few years in, and then being with my father, who I didn't see a lot when I was growing up because he was playing and I was doing things. So being together, we weren't ever together in the summers that much.
Right.
And so it took a while for that to feel comfortable. The last 2 years in Kansas City, everything clicked and it started feeling comfortable. We had a pretty good team. I started to establish myself as an everyday regular major league player. So it's like it was a progression of, you figure out the first couple of years what kind of player you are, what you need to do and stay in the big leagues. After that, you start to establish yourself around the league, and then the strike hit, and then everything kind of blew up from there.
1991 was actually, you had a couple of milestones in July of 91 that I want to talk about. You had a career high 6 RBIs versus Detroit on July 14th, 1991. You hit a 2-run home run and a grand slam that game in an 18-4 win. What do you remember about that day?
I think I remember most. I think I struck out 3 times in that game. So I remember that more than the two home runs. I think I only had 2 hits and there were 2 home runs. It was I started off the day, I think, pretty bad. I think I struck out my first 2 at bats or whatever, and then I got the hits later on. But I don't remember the good parts of that day as much as I remember that I think I struck out 3 times.
Well, less than a week later, on July 20th, you actually started a 22-game hit streak that went through August 13th of that year. When you're a big leaguer and you have a hit streak, does the ball seem like a beach ball? Like when you're just on it and you see everything and you feel comfortable and you can hit it to left, to right, to center, you can do whatever you want to do as a hitter. Does the ball seem like it's the size of a beach ball and it makes the game a lot easier?
No, the thing about that streak was I really wasn't going that good.
Okay.
I had hits, but it was a lot of 1 for 4s and 1 for 5s in there. So I don't think my batting average was high in that streak. It was just one of those weird things. Because I've gone on periods of 21 games where I had a higher batting average and felt better at the plate and did more damage than this one. And I think that was the longest hitting streak of my career. And it really wasn't, I really didn't do a whole lot other than scratch some hits together for the most part. I didn't hit a lot of home runs. It wasn't like I hit 400 in that time. It was just one of the odd things that happens in baseball. And I can't, for the life of me, I can't understand how I was able to have a 21-game hitting streak at that point in my career, where later on in my career, when I was a lot better hitter and knew the league better, I couldn't get together anything more than maybe 12 or 13 games.
Sure. Let's fast forward a little bit. Let's talk about 1994. 1994 was a tough season, not just for players, obviously, but for fans. Being a player in 1994, you're 4 years into your career. And obviously the strike happens. You were going pretty well. You were in the top 10 in the American League in stolen bases in 94 when the strike ended, and singles as well. So you were having a good season. What do you think happened in 94, from your opinion, strike wise? What was kind of the biggest reason that the strike happened? And then what did it do as a player? Like, how does that just abruptly, how does that abrupt stop, affect you as a player?
Well, I was deep involved in the negotiations because I was a player rep. So I understood more than others what was at stake, what was going on, what the owners were trying to do. And they were trying to break the union and implement a salary cap in their own system and those type of things. So I understood what was happening, where we were headed, and I wasn't surprised that the season got stopped. I was surprised that we didn't resume and have a World Series, but I understood that, we just had to stay ready. And, that might have been my only chance to get to the postseason. And it didn't happen. We had a really good team in Kansas City, and it was broken up after that. So it was unfortunate, being selfish. It was unfortunate for me what happened in 94. But on a whole, for the Major League Baseball Players Association, it built where they are at today because of some of the things that we stood our ground for in 94 and didn't allow the owners to implement their own salary cap in their own system, because the guys wouldn't get paid what they're getting paid right now. And I don't think the growth of the game would be at where it is right now if we would allow the owners to do what they wanted to do in 1994.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Royals in '94. I believe, if my memory serves, '94 was the year Bob Hamlin won the Rookie of the Year for you guys. So you guys,
Yeah, I think that was it. I think Hamlin won the Rookie of the Year, and I think Dave Cohn won in either '93 or '94. Won the Cy Young. So we had some good things going for us. We had a winning record in the season series against the White Sox and the Indians, who were like a game or two ahead of us at that time. And going into August, we really thought we had a good shot to get to the postseason.
let's fast forward a little bit to the end of the strike, April of '95. Right before the end of the strike, you get traded to the Cubs for two players. What was that like? One, leaving the only organization you'd ever played for. Obviously, you understand it's a business. You'd been around the game, and with yourself being a major league player and your dad, you knew it was a business. But what was your what was your mindset going into, okay, I got traded, I'm going to the Cubs, and that because you responded by finishing with 167 hits and a career high 38 doubles that year. So you must have liked Wrigley Field.
I wasn't surprised that I got traded after the strike had ended. And David Cohn, I think, got traded at the same time or the day later. We were both union reps and player representatives. And the owner of Kansas City, David Glass, was one of the main owners trying to break the union. So they were going to do some different things there in Kansas City. I was going to be a free agent. So they let my dad go. They traded myself. They traded David Cohn. And that team kind of went south. I don't think they had another winning season until '03.
Do you think the reason you got traded was because you were a player rep?
It probably one of the reasons, but also they were going to make some changes and they weren't going to pay guys. And, with the salary structure change where the owner didn't, he wasn't a big proponent of what was going on. And so I think I would have been traded anyway because of where I was salary wise. But I don't think it helped that I was part of the negotiation thing and involved heavily in that also. But I was happy in Chicago. I enjoyed playing day games. I like Wrigley Field. That was a good fit for me. I was sad to leave the only organization that I knew, but I enjoyed that time. The National League had a different brand of ball than the American League did.
Right. Yeah.
And that brand of ball fit my game a lot better than what the American League was turning into.
For people who have never been to Wrigley Field or people who might not be baseball historians, can you talk about how special Wrigley Field is to both play for and play against? I've been there. I was there for a Cubs Cardinals series just as a fan, and I can tell you, just the aura, you can feel the history when you walk into that ballpark. As a fan, can you talk about what it's like as a player to play in the same ballpark as Ernie Banks and Fergie Jenkins and guys like that?
It's number one is day games. That's how I think the game is supposed to be played.
Absolutely.
And so that's special because you're doing something that the rest of the league really doesn't do.
Mm-hmm.
The city, the field, the vibe is people skipping work, is people doing things that are like you're playing games in the daytime, which you're not supposed to do. People are coming to the game during the afternoon, having beers, hanging out, having a good time. They may work half a day. So everybody's doing something that in our society right now, in baseball wise too, you're not supposed to be doing it.
Right.
So you feel like you're being naughty. You're doing something, and it's a cool place to visit. It's a cool place to be as a player. I enjoyed the city of Chicago a lot better because we played day games. I could meet my friends at a decent hour and have dinner and hang out for a little bit. And you don't have to stay out late to enjoy it. And I like that aspect of playing in the daytime, being done by 5 o'clock, having dinner at 7. You could be home by 9:30, 10 o'clock, just like a normal working person. And, I could spend more time with my friends and family. We could do more. The city of Chicago had great restaurants, so we're always eating at nice places. But you could do it all when you didn't have to worry about what time I had to be home and get rest because we have a game the next day.
Right.
You know, you could leisurely hang out and have a good time in Chicago, where when I played in New York, we didn't start games till 7:40 at night. I wasn't getting back into the city till midnight. So it's just you had a different quality of life, and I liked it better playing in Chicago. And I think the fans enjoyed that also. It's not ruining your whole night.
Right.
You're having fun in the daytime. You can still do something. You can still do something at night and get to bed at a decent hour. So I just think that it's the special feeling of Wrigley, being in the neighborhood, the day games. I don't think it would have the same appeal if they played all night games.
Right. Right. Do you have a Harry Carey story? I mean, I always ask everybody from the 90s who played for the Cubs, do you have a Harry Carey story you can share? He's so
He was
synonymous.
towards the end when I got there. So he wasn't around the team as much. I think he passed in 98.
Yeah.
So those last few years, I don't think he traveled much with the team. He only did home games. He didn't come down to the field. I think his health was bad. So he wasn't walking up and down the stairs and out on the field that much. So he didn't really hang out with us as he did before when his health was good. So I really didn't have any long conversations or much conversation with him because he just wasn't around as much in his failing health.
In 96, you actually set a career high with 111 runs scored and 37 bases, and you were only caught 9 times. You talked about just kind of feeling comfortable and feeling like, you know, you can have a regular everyday life kind of like a normal person does in Chicago. Does that also make you relax and be a lot more at ease at the plate? And just is it kind of different mentally when you are playing day games? You know, like, hey, I can go hang out after the game. I can go see my friends and family. I can get home at a normal time and do it all again, as opposed to, like you mentioned, the New York atmosphere.
I think that, and just you're maturing in your career. You know, I was young. I was 22 years old in Kansas City, just figuring things out, just trying to survive every day. After 5 years in Kansas City, I get to Chicago. I have a better understanding of what's going on and how to go about it. And you get bigger, you get stronger, you learn. So, you know, you're progressing and turning into a better player, and you understand those things. And I think in turn, you get comfortable because you know that you can do some certain things and you're not wishing that you can do things. So I think it was a good transition, because 93 and 94, I proved to myself that I could have 2 good years back to back. And I felt now I didn't know if I was a good major league player or not until 93 and 94. I just was trying to survive 90, 91, and 92. From 93 on, I felt like I should be here. I'm a regular major league player. So, you know, I felt good going to the ballpark every day.
In Chicago, you had a teammate who was kind of a character, Turk Wendell. You know, he would jump over, he would chew giant wads, he would jump over the foul line so he wouldn't touch it. He was kind of a superstitious guy. Do you remember any Turk Wendell superstitions that kind of made the guys in the clubhouse laugh or anything like that?
He was with the Braves in the minor leagues, so we played against him coming up, and you know, just more so minor league stuff. In the big leagues, it was toned down in the big leagues when everybody saw him, but when he was in Greenville with the Braves in the minor leagues, it was a lot more than that. But no, he was just an average pitcher in the minor leagues. He didn't really do nothing special other than his antics. And then once after 3 or 4 years in the big leagues, especially then when we went to the Mets later, he turned into a really good, reliable reliever, and people forgot about the antics and just focused on, you know, he was pretty good, durable pitcher.
And on April 4th, you were the first batter for the first pitch ever thrown at Turner Field, and then in August, you got traded with Mel Rojas and Turk Wendell to the Mets. You kind of talked about it a little bit ago, but can you touch on what it's like playing in New York, even if it's not for the Yankees? Can you still talk about kind of that that pressure, what it's like playing in New York under the big city lights like that?
It's just a different vibe than any place. I don't even think LA would be up there with what you feel in being on a team in New York. Any of the teams there. Team hadn't been good in a while there. They were just starting to turn the corner and get better in '97. But the city hadn't embraced the team. '98, we were in it till the last day of the season, and we still couldn't sell out games the last week of the season in a pennant race. We're going for the wild card. The team didn't get embraced really until '99. So it took like 2 years for people to warm back up to the Mets that's when the Yankees had that great run.
Right.
So we were the second fiddle to the Yankees, and really nobody believed in the Mets. And then '99 they finally made the playoffs, and then 2000 they went to the World Series. I was not there then, but it was fun to be a part of what I saw. It was getting better finally, right, because it hadn't done much since '86, and you kept hearing references to '86 all the time. And they were finally turning the corner and getting better and catching up on the Yankees a little bit. And that's all they talked about there, was trying to catch the Yankees, and Yankees this and Yankees that.
In '98, you actually led the Mets in doubles, triples, and home runs, and you actually set career highs in, I believe, home runs, walks, strikeouts, and slugging. And you also led the team in caught stealing and strikeouts. Did you feel like overall in '98, that other than the strikeouts and the caught stealing, did you feel like overall that was your best offensive season?
Probably my best, because of where I hit. I wasn't leading off all the time.
Sure.
I hit down in the lineup, and I had guys like Piazza and Olrud. So a lot of my success that year was because that was the first time I got to hit down in the lineup with the quality of hitters ahead of me. So I had a lot of opportunities to drive in runs. I had a lot of good pitches to hit, and I was able to take advantage of those things. And that was the first time ever that I didn't hit the majority of my my spots in the lineup were up leading off or hitting second. So that was fun for me, to be in a position to do a lot of damage where I hadn't done that for
previously
my career. Yeah. But I had
you,
two guys that were two of the best hitters in the league hitting in front of me, so that makes things look a little easy.
Absolutely. Were there days when you were just in awe of things that Mike Piazza was doing offensively? He really kind of did things that no other catcher had ever done, other than maybe Johnny Bench. I mean, this guy's hitting 40 bombs a year. Did you know he was kind of like we talked about earlier, that he was one of those special players?
Yeah, he was special. We had a lot of special players on that team. John Olrud was speciel.
Was that the Roberto Alomar years?
No, Alomar came later. That we had Elgato. We had Alfonso.
Okay.
We had Ray Ordonez. We had one of the best defensive teams, I think, in the history of baseball in '98.
Absolutely.
So there were a lot of good things going on there with that team in '98, where we were hoping that the fans would embrace, and they didn't until '99, because they've been scoring so much. But that was just a fun group of guys, and a good, had Al Leiter, John Franco, were on those teams. That was a good group and a good mix of personalities and guys, to where we figured out that we're a pretty good team, and the Braves were our nemesis. We couldn't really beat the Braves, but nobody could then. We were getting closer. The gap was getting shorter.
You talked about being in contention almost the entire season in 1998. You actually had a pretty big home run in mid-September off of Billy Wagner on September 14th. You hit a game-tying 2-run home run in the 9th inning, and you guys went on to win that game. You mentioned you missed the playoffs, but what do you remember about specifically that at-bat, that moment, that game?
I just remember there's only 2 or 3 times when I've gone up to the plate thinking that, I'm going to try to hit a home run and going to just go for it and see what happens. And I figured that Billy Wagner was not going to throw me a breaking ball.
Right.
So I needed to be ready for 100-mile-an-hour heater and be on time and let it fly and see what happens. But all those games against the Astros that weekend, I think it was a weekend, I think they all went either extra innings or all one-run games. They were like playoff type atmosphere games. And the whole second half of September felt like a playoff game. And that was, good time because you want to play meaningful games. And we were able to play meaningful games throughout the end of September. We just came up one game short.
1999 was your final year in the majors, and you ended up playing for 3 teams that year, the Mets, the Rockies, and the Blue Jays. What happened? What about 1999 kind of changed your career, other than the fact that it was obviously the end of it? But did you know that at the end of 99, like, hey, this is it?
No, I got hurt early in the season. I hurt my knee, and I didn't think it was as bad as it was, and I don't think it got diagnosed right. But I tried to play through it, and that probably wasn't the right thing to do. I'd never been hurt in my career, so it was last year in my contract, and I felt that we had a special team in New York, and I wanted to be a part of that. So looking back at it, I probably shouldn't have tried to fight through as much as I did, but that's just how it was. So I missed out on an opportunity to go to the playoffs, even though I got a playoff share because I was there for more than half the year and got to see my teammates in the playoffs. And then when I ended up in Toronto, we were ahead, I think, in the wild card when I got to Toronto, or a couple games out. And then we had like 6 or 7 guys go down and hurt those chances. The only thing that is unfortunate is, like, I think I'm one of the players that played like the most games in their big league career without postseason, like 14 or 1,500 games or something like that. I was close 5 or 6 times and never was able to do it. The last game of the season, I think 3 or 4 times of those. So that's the only thing, is not being able to play in postseason. But to see my teammates in Chicago in '98 play in the postseason, my teammates with the Mets play in the postseason was cool, because I knew I was still a little bit a part of that.
Which was the best team that you ever played for? If you had the 94 Royals, the 98 Cubs, and the 99 Mets all playing each other, which Brian McRae team wins in a 7-game series?
I think the 98 Mets.
Okay. And why?
I think we had a deeper bullpen, deeper starting pitching, and the defensive teams, the Mets, the 93 team in Kansas City was pretty damn good. But yeah, the Mets were, I think the 98 Mets were probably the best team I was on.
You mentioned being in Toronto and you had a bunch of guys get hurt. You actually got benched, and that kind of actually opened up a spot for a guy named Vernon Wells, who ended up going on to have a pretty good career in Toronto. What do you remember about Vernon Wells kind of taking over that position? Obviously, you weren't there too long. You hit 195 after in Toronto, but what do you remember about Vernon Wells kind of taking over that position?
I just remember that he was highly touted in the organization, and they had brought 2 or 3 guys in. I don't know who started off as their center fielder in '99, but they had brought some guys in and tried to fill the hole there, and nothing had worked. And I was still hobbling with my knee injury, so I got shut down. And Vernon came up, and I don't know what he did '99, but a few years later, he ended up being one of, signing a big deal and being one of the better center fielders in all of baseball. They might have rushed him to the big leagues a little bit sooner than they wanted to, but I think it all ended up pretty good for him.
Absolutely. let's shift in and talk about your post playing career. While you were at the University of Kansas Rock'em Chalk'em Jayhawk, you actually studied broadcast journalism, which kind of led into your post playing career. You did some work for WGN actually while you were still an active player with the Cubs as an in studio analyst. You worked for MLB Radio for years. You worked for ESPN. Did that just kind of feel like a natural second career after being not just a baseball player, but kind of a journeyman, a switch hitter, not necessarily a superstar, but a guy who really had to kind of grind to get everything that he had?
Excuse me. It was something that I'd been doing in the minor leagues also. And, I thought that that's probably what I would do before I played, was be in broadcasting and be in the media. So it was something that was interesting to me as far back as high school. And it was easy fit for me because I've been taking classes in the off season. I've been, studying from broadcasters and interning at the local radio stations and things here in Kansas City. So it was something that I was prepping myself for, and something that I thought that I would want to do down the road.
Question from Mark. He wants to know what it was like to play on 3 different teams in 1999, and if that was kind of the final straw or the reason that you retired. You'd mentioned it was kind of more due to injuries, possibly.
Yeah, I got traded all on the road too. I started off with the Mets, got traded from the Mets to the Rockies when I was so I was with the Mets in Chicago, got traded to the Rockies, met the Rockies in St. Louis, then got traded from the Rockies to the Blue Jays and met the Blue Jays in Minnesota.
Okay.
So I never played a home game with the Rockies.
Oh, okay.
Wow. I played in St. Louis, Cincinnati, Florida in the 7 games I think I played with the Rockies. I met them on the road, got traded on the road. We flew on into Milwaukee, and then I got traded to Toronto and met them in Minnesota. And I just remember that the stuff I packed in New York, or had packed for me in New York, since we were on the road there, never made it to me.
Oh, really?
At all. Yeah, because I'd left New York. It was a weird road trip. Left New York. I don't know if we went somewhere before we went to Chicago, traded, go to St. Louis, then do the 2 cities. Yeah, so I was all over the place. My luggage is somewhere. I don't know.
Did you ever
where half my stuff.
Did you ever find it? Did you get it back?
No, I never found it.
Never found it. Never. Okay.
Yeah. No, I don't know if it got sent to Colorado, but I laughed because it's like I was part of the Rockies organization for 7 games, but never played a home game.
Sure. So after that, you became volunteering, and kind of giving back became big for you. Talk to me about your association with Big Brothers Big Sisters of America, and also Cystic Fibrosis Foundation.
I was doing Big Brothers and Big Sisters while I was a player.
Okay.
In Kansas City and Chicago. So I teamed up with that organization, and that's something that I was a board member there, and had been doing that for a while. And then cystic fibrosis, some good friends of mine from high school, they set up, and I think they did it 3 or 4 times. It's called 50 and 50. They tried to play 50 golf courses in 50 states in 50 days to raise money for cystic fibrosis. So I would help those guys out with those events, and met them at a couple places across the country when they were doing that.
Was a question from JR. He wants to know, was there a moment or a memory that emphasizes your love for volunteering, and are you able to convey giving back, so to speak, to those people, to those that you coach?
I think when I was younger, first came up to big leagues, they just tried to match players up with organizations that they could identify with, and Big Brothers and Big Sisters was one that I thought that I could do the most work with, because I could have the kids come out to the ballpark, and that was something that it wouldn't cut into my time during the season. and it was easy, and it was something that I thought that the kids would like, and the bigs and the littles could come out, and they
Sure.
do their outings. They could come out to the ballpark. So that was a good fit for me there. And then when I got traded to Chicago, I continued and I worked with the Chicago chapter and the Kansas City chapter. And I think we had some kids come from Kansas City to Chicago for a Cubs game and vice versa. So it was just that was an organization that was an easy fit for me because it didn't take away from what I needed to do as a ball player. And I was able to do some things that were easier for the groups to do because they were always looking for things for the bigs and littles to do, and what better to come out to a ball game. So hardly anybody turns down coming out to a ball game.
Right. Was there a moment or memory that emphasized your love for volunteering?
Not any moment of memory, just something that you have an opportunity to do something and have a platform for a short period of time to do something special. And I knew some of the board members of Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and I knew what kind of needs and what kind of help they needed. And I was able to, in a small way, help them out.
Let's talk a little bit about fan mail. Obviously being a big league player who obviously has a dad who was a player and manager. How much fan mail, just out of curiosity, do you still get a week?
During COVID, I think since everybody was home, it picked up and was double or so. And I probably get 30 to 40 letters a week, which
Okay.
is why I don't have it sent to my home. I have it sent to my office.
Sure.
I know there's some services that sell the retired players or maybe even current players addresses. They can find their addresses and things like that. So I didn't want that to happen. So my address is my office, the radio station that I part own. So I get all the fan mail comes here. But I could tell a spike during COVID when memorabilia was going crazy because people were sitting around doing nothing.
Absolutely. So if a fan wanted to send you fan mail, what's the best way they can get a response from you and get that autograph that they're looking for through the mail?
They just send it. I don't know what service it is, but they have it. And the station that I own is Sports Radio 810 WHB in Overland Park, Kansas, and that you can get the address there, and people just send it here to the radio station, and I get my fan mail here.
So you'd also found time previously to coach NAIA Park University, and as well in 2016 you signed a 2-year contract as the head coach of the Victoria Harbor Cats. Can you kind of talk about your foray into coaching a little bit?
Well, I went back and get my undergrad in 2012. So from 13 to 16, I coached at Park University, small NAIA school outside of Kansas City while I was getting my undergrad. 2017, I was at the University of Missouri. 2018, I finished up my undergrad. And in the summers, I coached or managed a collegiate summer team in Victoria in 17 and 18. In 2012, I managed a collegiate summer team in Morehead City, North Carolina. So that was something that I'd manage and coach high school travel teams in the area, and college summer ball is something that I enjoyed doing. And you get the kids and you don't have to worry about school. It's baseball only.
Sure.
And some of the kids I've had with my travel ball organization, Andrew Vaughn with the White Sox played for me in Victoria.
Okay.
Bryce Montez Dioka, who in the bullpen with the Mets, he played for me in high school. Garrett Clevenger with the Dodgers and the Phillies a little bit. So there's 3 or 4 guys that I've coached that have been up and down in the big leagues. Vaughn will be an everyday player probably this year. And then there's 6 or 7 guys that I've coached over the last few years that are in the minor league. So it's fun to see those guys making strides. The majority of the guys I coached are ended up coaching now. There's 20 guys that I coach that are college coaches. So that's cool to see those guys continue to do whatever they can do in baseball. And coaching is fun for me, and I enjoy working with kids of all ages. And the college thing was just me. They paid for my school, and I was assistant coach, and got
Sure.
to see if that's something that I wanted to do long term or not.
So before I let you go, and I appreciate your time, you've been very generous with your time today. Can you give me my favorite player all time is Kirby Puckett. I don't know if you can see that. It says Air Puckett. You were in with the Royals when the Twins won the World Series in '91, and in the early part of your career overlapped with part of Kirby's. Do you have a Kirby Puckett story that you can share?
Just him early in my career, there were two guys, veteran players, that kind of pulled me aside and just welcoming me to the big leagues. First, Carlton Fisk was one, and he just, he said, "Welcome to the big leagues." He's like, "You just need to play the game like your dad did, and everything will be fine." Right. He's like, "You won't have any problems. You just play the game the right way." And Kirby pulled me aside. "Hey, young buck, hey, welcome to the big leagues. And if you ever need anything, just let me know." So that made me feel good. And he looked out for young guys. Didn't have to be on his team. He looked out for young guys and wanted them to do well. And he took the time to come over and introduce himself to me, even though I knew who he was. And so that was kind of cool, and that made me feel good.
Do you think, as somebody who during your career kind of used speed, on base percentage, average, you weren't really a power hitter, do you think that the rules that Major League Baseball has instituted this year in terms of the pitch clock, but also limiting how many times pitchers can throw to first base, do you think we're going to see that increase in stolen bases?
It may be. I think there's been a slight up increase in spring training. Teams are still scared to give away outs.
Right.
And it doesn't combat the teams from pitching out.
Right.
So I think that guys that'll run are still going to run. Guys that don't run may run a little bit, but they're not. Because I think the game is designed now. You have 27 outs. Why give them away?
Right. Last question before I let you go. If you were MLB Commissioner Brian McRae, and you could change one rule today about the game, what rule would it be and why?
I would cut the commercial breaks on games to half and just charge double.
Okay.
And that way your games are going to get shorter, because I think it's more of a TV thing than what's actually happened on the field.
So you think it's more of a media thing than it is an on the field thing? Because
if the umpires call the rules that are already in play, if the umpires would adhere to them, then you would have the batter in the batter's box. There were already rules in place without putting a pitch clock up there.
Sure.
But they didn't. Nobody enforced it. But I think if you cut the commercials in half, and if you still want to get your money, charged double, cut the commercials in half, then that's your 20 minutes or 25 minutes right there that you're trying to shave off a game.
Absolutely. Brian, I've taken up way more of your time than I imagined. I cannot thank you enough for being willing to come on my podcast. The last 2 minutes of the show are always belong to my guests to let them know what people have going on in their life. If you have anything you'd like to promote, plug, or let us know about, the time is yours. Thank you so much for coming on my show. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you.
Oh, no problem. No, I unfortunately lost my brother 2 weeks ago to a heart attack.
So sorry.
49. He was going to turn 50. Going to turn 50 next month. So I'm in the process of setting up a nonprofit in his name to do some things for our high school program down in Florida where I played, and the organization that I do some work with here in Kansas City is a nonprofit. It's called Kansas City Sluggers Baseball, and since COVID, it kind of knocked out a lot of things we were doing. We're trying to get that back on track, and we'll probably have 4 to 6 teams this summer. So those are things that I'm doing. I'm not coaching as much because I have a daughter that's 16, and I'm gonna watch her get through high school and not be gone all summer.
Sure.
But yeah, so I'm just trying to do things for my nonprofit. Going to start a nonprofit in my brother's name down in Florida, and try to do some good things in his memory there, and continue to keep doing what I've been doing.
Absolutely. Hey, when you get that set up, will you please let me know the information and I'll pass that on to my followers. I'm sure they would
Okay.
love to help out with that. If you guys are in the Kansas City area, if you are listening to this or watching it on YouTube, please support WHB 810 AM. That is the radio station that Brian owns. Brian, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. And I would love to have you on again during the season to talk about everything going on in Kansas City and Major League Baseball.
All right. I appreciate it, Devin. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Okay, everybody, thank you, Brian, for being on the show. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will see you down the road in podcast land.